They said Ravenwood was empty. They said the power was cut in 1974, the doors welded, the files boxed and burned. But if you stood on County Road 9 after midnight, you could still see the lights stutter behind the boarded windows, fluorescence buzzing. Like a heartbeat trapped in concrete, Daniel Rhodes didn't believe in hauntings. He believed in views, abandoned places, long corridors, rusted beds. He filmed them all and fed them to an audience that rewarded risk. One night in Ravenwood Asylum, his pinned comment promised, no cuts, no edits. He wore the standard urban explorer armor, headlamp, spare batteries, bolt cutters, a pocket recorder that clicked when it started and clicked when it stopped. He told his followers he was going in alone. That part was true. The front gates were chained, the sign half swallowed by ivy, Ravenwood State Hospital. Someone had spray-painted a smile over the O in wood, and the paint ran like tears. Wind kinked the chain and whispered against the fence like cloth dragged over teeth. Daniel killed his bike light and let his eyes adjust. The building was a slab of shadow and window eyes, 3 wings like open arms. He thought about his hook, the why now, because the town was threatening demolition, because this was the last winter before the wreckers, because somebody had to show what they were erasing. The bolt cutters bit. The chain sighed. He stepped through, camera up. The foyer was a cathedral of peeling paint and dust, the kind that drinks sound. His headlamp caught the reception desk, a toppled wheelchair. A clock stuck at 3:12. The second hand twitched, but never reached 3:13. He said that out loud for the mic. 3:12, a breadcrumb. The recorder clicked. Hallway A smelled like wet paper and copper. Strips of paint curled from the walls in long, brittle tongues. He passed door after door with clouded glass and black stenciling. Hydrotherapy, quiet room, observation. Someone had nailed prayer cards over the observation slots. Some had teeth marks. His light snagged on a streak the color of dried cherries dragged at waist height for a long, long way. Animal, he said for the benefit of anyone later who'd accuse him of staging it. Raccoon, maybe, but the streak never wavered. It followed the wall like handwriting. He found intake with its swinging doors and broken blinds. Clipboards lay mummified on the counter. He filmed the sign-in sheet, names blurred by water, except for one that stood clean and dark, as if written that morning. D. Rhodes. Next to it, the time, E007. Cute, he said, heart climbing his throat. He wiped a finger over the ink. It smeared, fresh. The recorder clicked off. He didn't remember touching it. He clicked it back on. Battery bump, he lied to the dark. Deeper, a junction where the corridor split. Left toward treatment, right toward Ward C. Something on the floor at the junction made him stop. A pair of shoes, patient issue, canvas, the laces tied in a neat bow. Each toe pointed inward the way a child stands when told to wait. A tag dangled from one lace, brittle as onion skin, property of Ravenwood. Under that, in pencil, pressed hard enough to scar the card, room 3113. He laughed once, too loud, and the sound died without echo. Of course. He took the right-hand hall. The fluorescent sparked to life 9 doors in. No power, he thought. No power since 74, yet the ceiling stuttered with cold blue light, just ahead of him and just behind. His headlamp washed pale in the buzz. The clock he'd filmed was wrong. It wasn't stuck. Everyone's clock here simply refused to arrive. At the first corner, something moved behind the observation glass. A pale eclipse. Daniel turned, camera up, and saw only his own headlamp glare and the shape of a room. Bed with restraining straps, a mirror bolted above the sink at face level. He took 2 steps and the pale shape moved again, not inside the room, but on the glass itself, sliding along the frosted surface like a hand inside a lung. He filmed through the slot. The bed was empty. The mirror showed the door, his lamp, the nickel glare of the slot, and a second lamp behind him that wasn't there. He didn't turn. If you don't turn, it can't be there. He kept walking. Ward C's day room opened like a mouth, rows of chairs facing a blank wall where a TV had once hung. The chairs were turned at angles like bones after a fall. He framed the shot. This is where they gathered. And found the file cart. Top drawer jammed. Second drawer opened with a sound like old breath. Chart swelled with damp. He peeled one free. The paper came reluctantly like skin from glass. Experimental therapy, mirror habituation. Subject numbers, session times, notes in a precise, almost tender hand. Subject 27, prolonged mirror exposure, 47 minutes. Declares the other me is earlier, and tries to synchronize breaths. Post-session seizure, teeth marks on tongue. Subject 28 reports mirror continuing after I stop. Visual hallucinations, own face smiling before command. Subject 29 states, the smiling one asked me to trade places. Daniel lowered the page. Fake, he told the lens. Has to be. His voice sounded far away. A door beyond the day room led to treatment theater in graying block letters. The handle was cold as a coin pulled from water. He pushed and entered a semicircle of bolted chairs. Floor sloped toward a platform. The platform's centerpiece was a one-way mirror the size of a curtain, clouded, black at its heart. Wires ran from its base into the floor. Behind the mirror, nothing. Behind the mirror, a dark that felt heavy enough to lift. He half raised the camera and froze. Somewhere inside the room, not echoed, not warped, spoken, came a voice. Not loud, not whispering. A woman's voice with clinic softness. Good evening, Daniel. Please sit. He pivoted on his heels, light slashing walls, chairs, corners. Empty. The recorder clicked. Clicked off. Clicked on again by itself. He didn't remember moving his thumb. The mirror's cloud cleared like breath on winter glass. A ghost room took shape within it, the same theater, the same chairs, but cleaner, brighter, full. Shadows sat in the seats, dozens, all facing toward him. Their chests rose and fell. One crossed its legs, another toyed with a string. Their heads were turned slightly to the side as if listening. Behind the glass, the theater was occupied. Hallucination, Daniel said. Pattern pareidolia. The brain loves faces. Look closely, said the woman's voice. That helps. The mirror brightened further. He saw himself in chair 3 of the front row, hands folded too neat in his lap. The him in the glass smiled a fraction of a second before Daniel thought to. Daniel lifted his hand slowly. The other hand lifted too, later, hungry to keep up. The seats around that other him shifted with small, eager motions. The sensation came to Daniel the way thunder follows lightning. He was not watching an audience. He was being watched by an audience through a window he'd mistaken for a wall. Ravenwood pioneered observational therapies, the voice said, the syllables steady, gentle. We learned that the mind won't let go of itself if it's the last thing it can see. Who are you? Daniel's mouth was dry. Your facilitator, she said. We're very proud you're back on time. The recorder clicked and the click echoed from the inside of the mirror a heartbeat later, deeper, as if a larger room were closing its throat. Daniel edged left. The other him in the first row didn't move. It was busy cataloging something. Head cocked, eyes not on Daniel, but on the edges of him, as if measuring seams. Patients reported temporal decoupling within 8 minutes. The voice continued. Smiles that arrived early, blinks that refused to synchronize, breath that wanted to be borrowed. In the 13th minute, most requested trade, Daniel said. Trade what? Positions, said the voice. A kindness. The seats behind the other him vibrated with small, pleased movements. Daniel's headlamp dimmed, then flared, then dimmed again. The fluorescence joined, a single tube coughing into light, dying, trying again. He looked up at the ceiling. When he looked back, the front row in the mirror was empty. He stumbled back. His boot rang off metal. He'd struck a gurney sluiced with rust and old straps. Finger-shaped grooves were worn into the leather where someone had learned to hold still. The one-way mirror sighed. Pressure equalized between 2 rooms that didn't share air. Stop, Daniel said. He lifted the camera. The screen had gone to a vertical band of scan lines, a throat of interference. He could still hear his breathing on the audio. He could hear a second breathing under it that was trying, with strange tenderness, to match. Sit, the woman suggested. If you stand, the calibration never finishes. Daniel reversed until his spine found the theater's back wall. Cold bled through his jacket. The shadow audience returned, not in the mirror now, but climbing the walls, flat and tall and wrist-thin, like something thrown by fire from a flat place. They gathered around his own shadow and leaned toward it, mouths lantern open, as if warming their faces. Who are you? He asked again, hating how small it sounded. Dr. Solenne, said the voice. Ravenwood kept few of us. A smile touched her consonants. And many of you, he ran. Not panic, flight. The door he'd entered gave, and he burst into Ward C where the day room had turned wrong, Chairs facing the ceiling, straps tied to shadows on the floor. Something swung high above, a lamp maybe, or a barefoot in slow orbit, but when he aimed his light, it was only dust. The file cart had spilled. Papers lay like mold. One sheet caught his lamp and showed Experiment 13, Subject Dr. bold as a wound. Below, a date that wasn't from 1974 and wasn't from tonight. The date read, tomorrow. He didn't pick it up. Back through the hall, shoes at the junction now reversed. Heels toward the way he'd come, toes pointed deeper as if they'd decided. The clock at reception twitched to 3:13 and stuck hard with a noise like a fingernail snapping. His headlamp dimmed to a bruise. He shouldered the front door. It didn't move. The chain he'd cut had braided itself whole again and the padlock's mouth grinned shut. "Please return to theater," the voice whispered from nowhere, from everywhere, from just behind his teeth. "You won't feel it if you don't watch." Every observation slot along the hall went black, as if lids closed on 100 eyes. Then, one by one, they opened, not to the rooms beyond, but to mirrors bolted inside each door, each one showing Daniel from a different angle. Left cheek, throat, the corner of one eye. In some he moved too fast, in others he lagged. In the last he stood perfectly still while the Daniel in it ran. He took the left corridor, the one he hadn't taken before, because fear picks the opposite and calls it logic. The left corridor ended in a door-stenciled mirror room. Beneath, hand-cut letters added later with a soldier's patience. "Sit facing yourself until it smiles." He pressed his ear to the door. The recorder clicked. From the other side came the softest sound, many chairs being pulled into place across a cold floor. Not scraped, slid, carefully, kindly, as if by friends. He opened the door. The mirror room was bigger than the theater. A square with each wall made of one-way glass, 4 black panes facing one another like open throats. A chair waited in the exact center with its back to the door. Overhead, a single dangling bulb ticked with the metal patience of a watch. He stepped forward, and his lamp found him from every direction at once. Wrists and mouth and fear multiplied, angles disagreeing about what a man was. He didn't sit. Behind the glass, something sat for him. He inhaled through his teeth and fogged 4 worlds. "This is Daniel Rhodes," he said to the recorder, like an anchor thrown into cold water. "Time unknown, battery unknown, I'm in." The bulb cut. In the dark, the glass glowed, not from his lamp, from the rooms on the other side, lit, occupied. 4 Daniels looked back at him from 4 chairs. One smiled too soon, one didn't blink at all. One's mouth moved silently on words he hadn't learned yet. All 4 lifted their hands at once and pressed their palms to the glass. The print of each palm came through, not wet, not warm, but present, on Daniel's side. The fingerprints weren't loops or whirls. They were spirals that widened outward like water thinking. 13 minutes, Dr. Solenne breathed. So close to his ear he felt the micro-hairs tilt. And then the request. "What request?" he said. Because language was a key, and a key meant a door, and a door meant a world in which things opened. All 4 mouths formed the same word, without sound, precisely. He thought he misread. Then the recorder caught it as a throb in the bass where voices become weather, trade. Daniel stepped back and his heel touched the exact middle of the chair's cold metal foot. Something under the seat clicked as gently as mercy. He didn't sit. The room sat him. The straps were faster than hands, the buckles practiced. The bulb came back with a high electric whine and his breath burst white. Across the glass, 4 Daniels relaxed into their restraints like saints who'd learned to love it. He shook the chair. Bolts groaned in concrete. The mirror at his right brightened until it ate his lamp and showed him a Daniel whose smile arrived before the joke. "Good," said Dr. Solenne, voice like a gloved palm. "We can begin." All the clocks in Ravenwood, seen and unseen, found 3:13 together and held it like a kiss that didn't end. Something behind the far pane stood up that should have had to unbuckle first. It leaned close until its brow touched the glass. The glass did not resist. In its reflection, Daniel watched himself learn how long a second could be. "First session," the doctor murmured, and paper slid in a clipboard on the other side of the mirror with professionally quiet delight. Subject Dr. demonstrates high compliance. Requests anticipated. Outcome likely. Daniel closed his eyes. In the mirrored rooms, 4 Daniels did not, and one of them smiled. Too early, too wide. There's a sound that exists only in old hospitals. A mix of water behind walls, distant metal, and the echo of something too heavy to move but refusing to stay still. That was the sound that woke Daniel. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't in the corridor anymore. He was back in the theater. The restraints were gone. His lamp was off, but the overhead fixtures pulsed faintly like dying fireflies. His camera sat on the floor beside him, lens cracked but still blinking its red light, recording. He didn't remember sitting down. He didn't remember sleeping. On the platform in front of him, the one-way mirror glowed faintly from within. A room appeared on the other side, crisp and sterile. A gurney, a clipboard, an IV stand, and a woman sitting in a chair with her back to the glass. Session 2, she said, voice precise and calm. Subject DR, presenting with disorientation, delusional memory, and split perception episodes. Daniel froze. His throat ached when he swallowed. Patient exhibits resistance to positional correction, she continued. But cooperative response is expected with exposure repetition. Who are you? He asked, voice trembling. The woman didn't turn. She just lifted a hand, pressing her palm gently to the glass. The sound came through like knuckles tapping inside his skull. You already know, Daniel. He picked up the camera, focusing through the glass. The name tag on her coat came into view, Dr. Solenne. The letters pulsed once, as if breathing, and then faded. He staggered to his feet. You're not real. That depends, she said softly. Which side are you on? The lights flickered. The walls of the theater shifted, peeling into a new geometry. The rows of chairs flattened, stretching outward until they met the mirror's edge. The mirror itself split like water under pressure, the glass thinning, revealing the same room, and another beyond it. An infinite loop. An endless chain of mirrored theaters, each containing Daniel, each delayed by a heartbeat. You've been here before. Dr. Solenne whispered. Many times. We're just watching the playback. What playback? Your treatment. He turned and ran toward the door, but the hallway beyond the theater was wrong. The peeling wallpaper had been replaced by tiles, clean and green, smelling of antiseptic. The floor shone wetly, and from somewhere behind the walls, the intercom clicked to life. Patient DR, please return to your session. He stopped. His full name echoed next, not from the intercom, from the walls themselves, Daniel Rhodes. Subject 13, compliant, reactive. Every light in the hallway blinked on in sequence, leading deeper into the asylum. And from the end of the corridor, faint but clear, came the sound of footsteps. He ducked into a side room labeled Records Archive. Metal cabinets stood like coffins, their drawers slightly open, whispering when he passed. He aimed the light across the files. They were arranged chronologically, ending at 1974, the year Ravenwood closed. But the last drawer held one more folder. New paper, untouched. It read, Experiment, 13, Subject DR. Below, a date, 03/13, no year. Inside were typed pages and Polaroids of a man restrained in a chair, his face obscured by a shadow, his hands struggling against straps. He flipped to the last page and froze. Session 5. Subject begins to dissociate entirely from temporal origin. Speech loops. Visual manifestation of mirrors independent of environment. Subject will soon achieve completion. In the photo clipped beneath it, the man's head was tilted forward, but through the gap in the hair, Daniel could see his own mouth. He dropped the file. A faint whirring noise came from the recorder on his belt. It had turned on again. He heard his own voice playing back, from hours earlier. This is Daniel Rhodes. Time unknown. Battery unknown. The voice stopped, then continued. But this time it wasn't what he had said. Battery stable. Patient stabilized. Observation in progress. He yanked the batteries out. The device kept playing. He's resisting integration. Increase exposure. Then the faint scratching began. Inside the recorder, like fingernails on metal, he dropped it. It hit the floor, and the voice on it screamed, just once, sharp, childlike. When he looked back up, there was writing on the nearest wall. Fresh, dripping black letters. Look behind you. He turned. A row of mirrors lined the room now, floor to ceiling, none of which had been there before. Each reflected him, but differently, One version of Daniel stood still, one smiled faintly, and one was pressing his palms to the glass, whispering words his real self couldn't hear. The one in the center moved closer on its own. He backed away, and the reflection leaned forward until its forehead rested against the glass. Its mouth opened, and from his side came a voice. "We remember you." The glass cracked outward, not inward. He ran again. The corridors folded and refolded, the asylum rearranging like a brain protecting its secrets. Every turn led him deeper. He passed old wards, rooms filled with restraints and observation mirrors that pulsed like heartbeats. The smell of metal grew thicker. At one intersection, he saw a faint light flickering in a door labeled Therapy 3. Inside, an old reel-to-reel recorder spinning on its own. He hit play. Static filled the air, then the soft tone of a woman's voice. "Dr. Solenne, continuing session with subject 13. The patient insists he's a visitor, a filmmaker, but the delusion persists even as the sessions repeat." "Delusion?" A man's voice, his own, answered, quiet, distant. "Yes, he believes he's documenting an abandoned building. In reality, the building documents him. That's not possible. It's already happening." The tape hissed, then continued. "When I ask him what year it is, he says 2025, but the date outside the door is still 1974. He's overlapping." "Stop this," Daniel whispered. "I can't," said his own voice from the tape. "You already pressed record." The reel spun faster, the voice distorting into overlapping screams and laughter until the tape snapped. The lights blew out, and in the darkness, something whispered directly into his ear. "Session 3 begins when you blink." He blinked, and suddenly he was standing in another room. The walls were lined with old therapy chairs facing mirrors. The mirrors were fogged, each one faintly glowing. He took a step forward. The fog cleared. Each mirror showed him again, not his body, but different versions of himself. One older, one younger, one burned across the face, one blindfolded. "How long do I stay here?" he whispered. "Until they stop blinking," said the voice of Dr. Solenne. He looked closer. The reflection's eyes were open, wide, unblinking. Their chests didn't rise, and yet one of them smiled. "You'll understand soon," it said, perfectly synchronized with his lips. He raised his hand slowly. So did they. Then all 4 mirrors cracked outward at the same time, like glass lungs exhaling. A gust of freezing air filled the room, carrying whispers that overlapped like radio static. He could almost make out the words, "We are what's left when the glass forgets to lie." He stumbled backward into the corridor again. The emergency lights pulsed red now, illuminating fragments of words painted along the walls. "Patients still reside." The next hallway curved back toward the theater, but the mirror inside was shattered. Beyond the cracks he could see movement. A figure walked behind the glass. Its steps matched his perfectly. He stopped. It stopped. He lifted the camera. So did it. But the reflection's lens was darker, wider. He realized it wasn't a reflection at all. It was another camera, filming him, and behind that camera, something breathed. "Session 3, said Dr. Solenne's voice, now calm again, filtered through the broken intercom. "Subject appears ready for alignment. Prepare for final observation," he screamed, throwing the camera at the glass. It hit, but the lens didn't shatter. It sank in, as if the surface were made of liquid. His reflection caught the camera, smiled, and stepped closer. "Almost finished," it whispered. He turned to run, but slammed into another mirror behind him. This one showed the therapy theater again, but the seats were full. Rows of Daniels sitting, smiling, waiting. And in the front row sat Dr. Solenne, holding a clipboard. "You see," she said softly, "you were never exploring the asylum. You were returning to it." "That's not true," he gasped. She smiled. "Then why do you remember the layout?" He woke on the floor again, surrounded by the sound of humming electricity. The camera's red light blinked. The recorder clicked itself on and played his voice. "Session complete. Patient responsive. Integration pending." He crawled to the door. It didn't open this time, and because it wasn't a door anymore. It was a mirror, and from the other side his reflection tilted its head, waiting. The reflection whispered one word: "Trade." And as he watched, it reached out, not through glass but around it, as if the barrier had never existed. The light exploded white, and Daniel finally saw what the asylum had been hiding all along. It wasn't abandoned, it had simply been waiting for the next patient to check in. The worst rooms don't advertise themselves. They wait. Daniel knew which door it was before he saw the stencil. The corridor bent toward a darker square where the fluorescence refused to reach. Cold thickened. His breath turned to lace that didn't drift. On the wall, the old paint had bubbled and burst in round little blisters like a map of scars. Someone had scrawled a warning above the lintel with something that wasn't ink. "Sit facing yourself until it smiles," he almost laughed. It came out a gasp. The handle was smooth with use. He touched it and felt the pulse of electricity like a vein behind metal. When he pushed, the door opened a few inches and then eased the rest of the way on its own, as though a gloved hand on the other side completed the motion. The mirror room wasn't big. It was endless. 4 walls of one-way glass squared around a single chair, bolted to a drain-scarred floor. A pendant bulb hung low on a frayed cable, yellow as old teeth. Every reflective surface showed him from a different angle and time. The right wall offered a Daniel moving a half-second late. The left wall showed a Daniel raising his hands before he decided to. The wall behind the chair presented a Daniel who didn't blink at all. If he wandered, 4 versions wandered. If he swallowed, 4 throats flexed. In each pane, a faint fog bloomed from his breath and then cleared with delicate reluctance. As if the glass were doing him a favor, he took 1 step in. On the other side of the right-hand pane, a second chair slid quietly into view, pushed by nothing he could see. It stopped opposite his own, empty and perfectly aligned. "Daniel," said Dr. Solenne, so near to his left ear that he flinched away from the glass. "Please be seated." "You've already missed 2 minutes." He pivoted. No one stood there, only his lamp and the chalky oval of his face multiplied, each copy a little different. "I'm not sitting," he said. "I'm leaving." He reached for the door. The doorknob wasn't there anymore. The door had become a mirror. His palm met his palm, warm as skin. His pulse came back through the surface stronger than his own. "One sits," said Solenne. Her voice now came from everywhere, a tasteful, compassionate head voice with the fatigue of long kindness. "Whether you occupy the chair or it occupies you is only a matter of naming." Metal groaned. The chair's front legs scraped forward an inch. The strap buckles winked. Daniel backed away until his jacket touched colder glass. In the pane behind him, the late version braced to run a moment after he did. The early version had already started. Only the unblinking one held still, the corners of its mouth threatening to lift as if keeping a secret. "Why me?" he asked. "Proximity, curiosity, pattern," Solenne said pleasantly. "Ravenwood is a mirror hospital. We admitted patients who reflected the work we needed. You recorded yourself. We prefer those who assist," the bulb ticked. A soft, collective sound shivered through the mirrors. Chairs being pulled out in rooms he could not see. In the pane opposite, a crowd cohered the way fog does when it realizes it's a shape. Rows of silhouettes sat down, knees folding, hands folding, heads tilting toward him in that same interested, statistical angle. A theater on the far side, an audience that did not clap. "Let's begin," said Solenne. Session 3. Subject DR mirror habituation at 9 minutes. Onset of temporal decoupling. Complete. "I'm not—" "Please watch," she said with gentle emphasis, as one might steady a hand with 2 fingers. "If you don't, the pain has nowhere to go." The chair found the backs of his knees. He didn't sit. He arrived, as if gravity had written his name on the cushion long before he came. Straps whispered over his wrists. Another settled his chest and breathed with him, slow and deliberate like a larger animal teaching a smaller one how to hibernate. The buckle by his left hand tightened with an easy confidence that did not require consent. He measured his breath to keep it invisible. The glass measured it too, condensation blooming to a rhythm that disagreed politely with his own. "Ravenwood's problem," Solenne went on, clipboard in her tone, "was that patients mistook the mirror for truth. They thought the image showed the world as it is. We discovered the image shows the world as it wants to be. A kindness, Daniel. Desire is a scalpel with a handle." In the right-hand pane, his slightly late self licked dry lips after his tongue moved. In the left-hand pane, his slightly early self smiled, very small. In the rear pane, the unblinking version leaned forward an imperceptible degree, as if listening from deeper ice. "Names?" Daniel asked. His voice surprised him. Soft, classroom polite. Very good, Solenne said. We found that naming increases compliance. Would you like to name your mirrors? He almost said me, 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 me. The word felt like chewing tinfoil. No, then I shall, she said, delighted. Behind you, anchor, the one that refuses to look away. Right, delay, the one that loves what just happened. Left, prompt, impatient, eager to be through. And in front, in front we place the one that is tired of obeying. The front pane brightened fractionally. In it, Daniel raised his hands despite the straps. His palms met glass and sank a millimeter, as if pressing against very thick milk. Hello? The front one mouthed. No sound. The mic in the room captured only his own respirations and a second set beneath it, slow and careful, learning. Ravenwood's innovation, Solenne continued, was trade. A patient's suffering often resides in a posture they cannot abandon. The mirror offers to hold it. In exchange, it requests the easy parts. I don't have easy parts. Every self has a sleeper, she said cheerfully. You call it filmmaker. We call it observer. He is the one who convinced you to come. The audience beyond the front glass leaned forward together. Their attention weighed as much as a blanket. Daniel's teeth ached. He tasted old copper and something sweeter. A memory of orange hand soap and fluorescent hum, and an oval-faced woman who smelled like winter air, whose name tag read Solenne in thread. He remembered being smaller. He remembered the way the bulb ticked when you closed your eyes. No, he said, and the chair took the word like a coin. Shall we look? Solenne asked. It helps, the mirrors obeyed. All four panes changed at once, not by sliding, but by deciding. The room beyond the front pane became a clean version of this one. Bright, fresh paint, straps clipped with nursery economy, the same chair, occupied. A man sat bolt upright, mouth soft, muscles obedient. His eyes were raw from not closing. The camera at his feet pointed at his heart. He was Daniel. He was not. Trade is patient-led, Solenne narrated. He asks. We grant. The other Daniel's lips moved. Daniel strained to hear and got nothing. Only the recorder's little ulcer of a hum under his ribs, eating silence. In the right pane, delay, the late Daniel repeated whatever the front one had said, only louder, as if rehearsing. The unblinking one behind, anchor, did not move at all, and yet his not breath fogged the glass in a neat circle that matched Daniel's own. You'll feel the seam, Solenne said kindly. A place where thoughts stick. That is where he enters. I don't want. It is not want, she murmured. It is geometry. The pendant bulb dimmed. The shadow audience's knees touched the backs of the shadow chairs like tide. Something changed pressure in the room. The eardrum feel of elevators and clotting doors. The straps loosened, not to free but to invite. His wrists lifted a fraction without his consent, hands drifting forward as if the room had tilted downhill toward the glass. In the left pane, prompt, the early Daniel pressed his palm first. The right pane followed. The back pane waited, then kept waiting. In front, the almost Daniel smiled a little wider and mouthed a single syllable. Daniel didn't hear it so much as lose it, like forgetting the word for a common object you're touching. Then he knew it. Trade. He shook his head. The chair absorbed the motion as data, not refusal. Bolts creaked in the floor. The straps lengthened kindly to accommodate patient expression. Excellent, said Solenne. Subject verbalizes the request internally at 13 minutes. In many moral vocabulary intrudes. Steal, betray, sin. We prefer clinical language. The process is not theft but allocation. Your easier thoughts will live in the figure who deals better with life. Your complicated ones will remain with us, where we love them. You don't, he said. Not you, she agreed. What you carry. Many hospitals throw such burdens away. A small warmth softened her voice. We keep them. Something touched the back of his head. Not a hand, a place. The sensation of arriving where hair remembers being cut. Open, Solenne said. Not to his mouth, not to his eyes, but to a seam in the back of his mind that felt like a zipper starting at the base of the skull. He remembered the clock in reception twitching at 3:12, failing 3:13 over and over. He remembered a pair of patient shoes with a tag that claimed room 313 in pencil so hard it tore the card. He remembered the file cart. Experiment 13, subject DR, date, tomorrow. Why that number? He asked, stalling with the last bone chips of language. Because it looks like a mirror, said Solenne, amused. A 1 and a 3. A 3 and a 1. He laughed wrong. The early Daniel on the left laughed first. The late one on the right chased it a half-second too bright. The unblinking one behind smiled at last, slow as thaw. The front pane rippled. The man who was him and wasn't leaned closer until skull met glass. The surface yielded inward, dimpled by forehead, then sprang back with a sound like a drum you don't want to hear again. Please, Daniel said without deciding to. He wasn't sure who he said it to, the doctor, the audience, the other hymns to himself. The room brightened the way eyes do when you say please to someone who enjoys that word. The mirror air warmed. Very good, Solenne said. Now we may accept. The straps at his wrists threaded themselves through brass loops he hadn't seen. A mechanism beneath the chair chimed once as if to mark time kept, a nurse's desk bell ring. Every copy of him in every pane pressed palms to glass and left prints that came through to his side. Spirals upon spirals. Edges not whirled but written, as if the ridges spelled something no one had the alphabet for. He stared at his hands. The prints on his side matched the shape of his palms and didn't. The lines ran too deep, too neat, too evenly spaced to belong to skin. The pattern looked less like a fingerprint and more like a topographical map of a drained lake. Ravenwoods. Founders speculated the self divides into those who can watch and those who can live, Solenne said. Our work reassigns. In time, the watchers will stay with us. A click of pen on paper. Outcome likely. Stop it, he said. And because the strangest things are true, he said it in the same tone he once used to ask his first camera not to die before the shot ended. He hadn't thought about that night in a year. He hadn't thought about the friend who held the light too long and burned fingerprints into plastic. The room indulged him by pausing. That was worse than refusal. Look, Solenne said again, almost tender. If you look while it happens, it stays kind. He made his eyes do it. The front pane filled his world. The other Daniel leaned as he leaned, just a fraction before him, speaking a silent narration that felt like narration in reverse. Words removing themselves from Daniel's mind as the other mouth shaped them. The edges of the glass softened to a plump meniscus. Air smelled faintly of wintergreen and static. Trade, said both mouths. He felt the seam unzip. Not pain. Arrangement. Thoughts shuffled to where they fit better. Memories that hated light slid toward the glass like guests leaving early through the kitchen. Images he cherished, bikes and summer and a woman's laugh through a door, slipped to the back. Not stolen, but taken care of by the version in the pane who promised to use them correctly. I don't want to forget, Daniel said, which turned out to be the trigger. The mechanism under the chair sounded a quiet, satisfied cluck. The audience behind the glass leaned forward in a wave that lifted him without hands. Behind his head, something entered. Not from outside, but from a room adjacent to the skull that had always been there and had only needed unlocking. It was not a voice. It was not a presence. It was the habit of being observed. A practiced patience settling around his thoughts like gauze. Yes, Solenne breathed. We keep those for you. Let him have the rest. Let who? The other Daniel smiled too early and reached. His arms passed into the pane and did not ripple it. Warmth poured over Daniel's wrists where the straps had been. For an instant, fingers that were his and were not his laced with his own. The fit was perfect because the pattern had been cut using him as a template. Almost. Solenne soothed. Something thumped the wall behind him. Soft, regular, wrong. He couldn't turn his head, but the unblinking anchor pane brightened enough to show a corridor and a clock face just beyond the mirror room door. The second hand twitched at 3:12, jittered, and at last arrived at 3:13. When it did, every light in the hospital went out together, a blackout that felt like applause. In the dark, he felt the other Daniel step into him the way a man steps into a coat that fits beautifully. Not weight, not a shove, but settlement. The room tasted of dust and the silver of old spoons. The filament of the pendant bulb glowed hair-thin red, an ember that revealed nothing and named everything. Done, said Solenne, joyous as a whisper is allowed to be. It wasn't. A piece of him had misbehaved and refused to cross. It watched. He felt it watching from the wrong side, his best, worst part, the sliver that wouldn't relinquish the habit of cameras. The room felt it too. Oh, Solenne said, softer. Dear, the lights came back low. In the front pane, the Daniel who had smiled too early now breathed like him. In the right pane, the late one lagged no more. In the left, the prompt one relaxed as if sated. Behind, the unblinking one blinked. Once, a dry, papery close and open that sounded in his bones. Integration incomplete, Solenne announced to her clipboard. Apology tucked inside professionalism. Observer fragment remains external, the chair loosened. He stood without deciding to. His knees worked. His breath obeyed. He was Daniel Rhodes. He was whole. He was lighter. Good, Solenne said, approving. Now leave. What? He asked. The word came out properly. Go home, she said, as if it were obvious. You have footage to review, and we have work to finish. He reached for the door and found a handle. It turned. The mirror room opened to the corridor, which, like a tongue after a lie, had remembered how to be a corridor. The clock beyond showed 3:14. For the first time since he'd entered Ravenwood, time had moved forward. He walked. The building did not resist. The reception desk waited where it should. The wheelchair did not watch him. The chain he'd cut in the foyer lay on the floor like a shed skin, a lock grinning open as any mouth. He stepped through the gate and into night. The air outside felt stale, as if it had forgotten lungs. He climbed onto his bike. He did not look back. He did not notice that his shadow did not match. He made it home in 20 minutes he couldn't later remember. He washed his hands for a very long time and could not get rid of the faint scent of wintergreen. He plugged the cracked camera into his laptop. The first file opened with the clean greed of healthy media. Black hallways, flares of lamp, his breath, his voice saying professional things. He watched himself enter the mirror room. The feed stuttered, skipped, then stayed on him as he sat. He watched straps settle. He listened to silence. The footage contained no woman's voice. It contained only him staring at himself, crying without tears. At 03:13 FERG, the image popped the way ears do when planes descend. For exactly 1 second, the lens caught a second Daniel standing in the mirror, one palm on the glass, smiling that little early smile. Then the feed normalized. He scrubbed forward to the end. The last shot showed the door opening and him leaving. Lamp steady, mouth steady, pace reasonable. The camera remained on the floor, angled up at the empty chair he'd vacated. In the very top edge of the frame, the fraction where lenses pick up what they weren't asked to, something still sat in the seat. He zoomed. Pixels broke into chewable squares. The shape refused to clarify, not a glitch, but a choice. He leaned closer. Behind him, something leaned the same amount. He froze. On his laptop screen, in the webcam preview window he never used, the room behind him contained an extra chair. A shape occupied it with his posture. It watched him with terrific patience, eyes wide as a doctor's, smile almost there, not unkind. He turned slowly. Nothing stood in the room. The chair was where it lived. The air was plain. The screen changed anyway. The webcam window no longer showed his apartment. It showed a hallway, green tile, antiseptic gloss, a clock yawning from 3:12 to 3:13 in a loop that refused to land. And just at the edge of the frame, a hand he recognized by its scars pressed to glass from the wrong side and left a spiral print that spread like a slow stain. His phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. He answered without lifting it. "Daniel," said Solenne, pleased. "Welcome home. What did you leave with me?" His voice came out flatter, closer to a microphone test. "Only what you asked," she said. "The easy part, the observer to carry it. He will stand behind you for a few days. He will adjust, then he will return. Return where? To be watched," he swallowed. "And the rest of me?" "With us," she said, businesslike again. "We're very good at care." Something moved in the webcam window. The corridor filled with a slow tide of chairs, sliding out from doorways and aligning themselves along the walls, facing the camera, facing him. No hands pushed them. They knew where to be. "Session 4 tomorrow," she said brightly. "Sleep if you can, or don't. It arrives either way." The line clicked. The phone screen stayed lit at 03:13. No clock app, just those digits, burned in like an afterimage. A soft tap came from the bathroom mirror. Then 3 more, patient, teaching the rhythm to the house. His laptop speakers whispered a loop of quiet breath. One set was his. One set arrived a beat later. He tried not to watch the webcam feed. He failed. The corridor in the window brightened. At its far end, a sign hung crooked above a door. Discharge. The door swung open, slowly, for no one. A shadow stepped through that was the right height and had the wrong patience. The webcam feed glitched to black and reflected his own face back at him for the first time, honestly, all night. It smiled too early and didn't stop. They say a camera can't lie, but it can repeat a lie so perfectly that the truth forgets which side it's on. Daniel stopped watching the footage on the second night. He couldn't bear the noise, the faint hum beneath his own voice that rose and fell like breathing behind him. He tried muting it. It grew louder. He unplugged the laptop. It stayed on. The screen flickered every few hours, freezing on the same timestamp. 03:13. Every time it happened, the faint outline of a chair appeared behind him. The same angle. The same shadow that didn't belong to any object in his apartment. He moved the chair to another room. The shadow didn't move with it. By the third night, he'd stopped sleeping altogether. The house itself began to mimic the asylum. The bathroom tiles turned pale green when the light hit them. The hum of the refrigerator syncopated with his pulse until it sounded like the low drone of hospital lighting. The mirror above his sink fogged over from the inside even when the air was cold. When he wiped it clean, he saw his reflection, but not his face. It was him, but slightly delayed, the same subtle lag from Ravenwood. His reflection's eyes blinked late, its head tilt half a second wrong. The pattern was familiar now. It meant the other one was watching again. He whispered to it, "Why me?" The reflection mouthed back, "Because you filmed us." He tried to leave the apartment. He made it down the hall, down the stairs, out to the street, and found the world too bright, too silent. The sun hurt his eyes in a way that felt electrical, like overexposure. When he looked at the windows of the neighboring buildings, every pane of glass shimmered faintly with movement. Faces pressed against the other side, pale, patient, distorted by the light. They were the same faces from the Mirror Theater, the same audience. He ran. When he got home, his front door was already open. His laptop sat on the floor, screen glowing. The webcam light was on. "You left the session early," said Dr. Solenne's voice, clear and composed through the speakers. "We don't encourage that." He picked up the computer and threw it against the wall. It hit, cracked, and went silent. He laughed, loud, relieved, hysterical. But the relief lasted 2 seconds. The sound continued from the kitchen. The voice had moved to the next reflective surface, the chrome of the refrigerator door. "There you are," she said warmly. "Ready to continue?" He smashed every mirror in the apartment. The shards kept showing him anyway. Each one caught an angle of a room he didn't own. Green tiles, peeling paint, the smell of antiseptic memory. The glass wasn't breaking. It was multiplying. Every piece a window, every window another corridor in Ravenwood, opening wider with each fracture. The largest shard, triangular, balanced against the wall, showed him standing in a hallway that looked exactly like his own, only cleaner, older. The lights above him flickered in the same rhythm he'd learned to fear. In the shard, his reflection began to walk forward, closer to the glass. Daniel didn't move. The reflection smiled, and from inside the shard came the faint echo of Dr. Solenne's voice. Session 5. Integration nearing completion. That night, he recorded everything. If he was going mad, he wanted proof of it. He set up cameras in each room, one on the bed, one facing the living room window, one on the kitchen counter. Then he turned off every light and waited. At 3:13 a.m., all the feeds glitched at once. The kitchen camera captured movement first. The reflection in the refrigerator shifted, without him in front of it. The bedroom camera caught the blanket. Sinking beside him, indentations forming in the shape of hands. The living room feed showed something worse. The television turned on by itself, showing static that pulsed in the rhythm of his own breathing. Within the static, faint figures moved, people sitting, watching, clapping without sound. The Ravenwood audience. He tried turning off the power, pulling every plug, yanking every fuse. The static stayed. When he looked closer, he could see himself in the middle of the audience, strapped to a chair, eyes open, smiling early. He screamed until his throat broke. The power came back on by itself. The clock on the wall blinked from 3:12 to 3:13, then froze there, humming faintly. That was when he heard it. Knocking. From the other side of the bedroom mirror, the one he thought he'd destroyed. 3 knocks. Slow, polite. He waited, terrified to answer, terrified not to. Then came a voice. Faint, muffled, distorted through glass. "Daniel, please. It's me." His own voice. He pressed his ear to the wall. "What do you want?" "Trade." The floorboards under him began to vibrate. He ran to the door. It was locked. He hadn't locked it. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the entire apartment had sunk under water. The shadows deepened into shapes. In the reflection of the window, the other Daniel stood in the hallway outside, waiting calmly. "You left something behind," it said. It lifted a hand, revealing the cracked recorder. The red light blinked in rhythm with his heartbeat. "You can't carry both halves," it whispered. "Let me help." He backed away, shaking his head. "Stay out. You already let me in." The reflection pressed its palm to the glass. The window bowed inward, stretching like liquid, until the outline of a handprint bulged into the room. He grabbed the nearest thing, a chair, and smashed the window. The glass exploded outward in a rain of shards. But instead of falling, they hung in the air, suspended, each one a screen replaying moments from the asylum. He saw himself strapped to the chair. He saw Dr. Solenne watching through glass. He saw the words, "Subject D. R. Integration pending." Every shard whispered at once, "We're still here." The shards fell. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing in the asylum corridor. Not a dream, not a flashback. The same green tiles, the same hum, the same clock frozen at 3:13. His camera was in his hand, blinking red. The chain at the entrance hung broken beside him. He turned, expecting to see the door to the outside. There wasn't one. Behind him, where the exit had been, stood the mirror room door. "You came back," said Dr. Solenne from everywhere. "Good. We can finish now." The door opened before he could touch it. Inside, the chair waited, empty. "Where is he?" Daniel asked. "Which one?" He looked toward the mirrors. Each wall showed a different scene. One reflected the asylum exactly as it was. One showed his apartment, empty. One showed the theater audience, sitting still. And one showed the chair, already occupied. By him. The other Daniel raised his head. His eyes were empty sockets, black and endless. He smiled early. "Thank you," it said, voice identical to his own, "for letting me out." He stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold. The hallway stretched behind him, longer than it should have been. The emergency lights flickered red, then white, then black. Every door along the hall burst open. From each came a figure, patients, doctors, shapes that had once been reflections, now walking freely. Their faces were pale and featureless, their bodies thin as shadows. They walked past him, ignoring him, filing toward the exit that wasn't there. They only needed one to open the door, said Dr. Solenne's voice, distant, fading. "Now that door is you." He ran. No matter how far he went, the corridor folded back into itself. Every turn led to another mirror. Every mirror showed another version of him running, slower, then stopping, then turning to smile. He screamed at them, "What do you want from me?" And they answered, in perfect unison, "To be remembered." The final thing the security cameras at Ravenwood ever recorded showed Daniel leaving the building at 3:13 a.m. He appeared calm, composed, carrying his camera in one hand. He walked straight through the main gate, but the reflection in the glass door did not move. It stayed in the lobby, standing perfectly still. The next morning, the lights in the asylum were on again. All of them. And in the mirror room, the chair was occupied. A man sat perfectly upright, eyes open, smiling early. The tag on his wrist read, "Patient DR, integration complete." Weeks later, the footage from Daniel's cameras surfaced online. No one knew who uploaded it. The video opened with a title card, "The Asylum That Never Closed." It played like a documentary, Long shots of hallways, the sound of wind and footsteps. But halfway through, the perspective shifted. The camera turned around, revealing the person behind it. Not Daniel, Dr. Solenne. She smiled into the lens. "Welcome to Ravenwood," she said. "Observation begins when you press play." The video glitched and looped, restarting automatically at 3:13. Some viewers reported strange things after watching it. Mirrors fogging over, whispers in the dark, their own reflections blinking late, and a few said that if you paused the video at exactly 3:13:07, you could see a faint shape standing behind Solenne, a man holding a camera, smiling too soon.